Hello and welcome to the Green Voice podcast. I'm your host, Grant Ervin with S&B USA, coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. We got Tanner on controls here. Tanner, how are you over there? Doing good? Got a thumbs up. He says great. And we also got our guest here today, Josh Gould from Duquesne Light Company. Josh, you are the, let me get this right, Director of Advanced Grid Solutions and Strategic Planning.
You nailed it, Grant. You nailed it.
Awesome. Super excited to have you here on the Green Voice podcast, talking about some sustainability, energy, all kinds of fun stuff today. I always love to have our friends on from Duquesne Light because I feel like we're looking into the future. We're seeing all kinds of, new innovation and energy, and great to have you because you're the advanced grid solutions guy. So you are the future, right?
We're trying to create it. We'll put it that way. We're trying to create it.
So maybe just to get started, just to introduce yourself a little bit about who you are and maybe how you came to your role. And then I'd also love for you to share with the listeners about your role at Duquesne Light and some of the work that you get into.
Yeah. Well, someone once said to me, you're either from here and then you come back if you ever leave, or you just move here. And I'm the latter.
Okay.
So I'm not a Yinzer, but I'd like to think I'm an adopted Yinzer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So It's been about 6 years here in Pittsburgh. Our family moved from New York.
Okay.
And so I've spent most of my career in the energy space.
We're out in New York, just
Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a city guy.
Yeah, we're downtown Brooklyn. And I'll say moving to the Pittsburgh suburbs was an awesome change.
Okay.
It was a big change, but it was an awesome change.
Space.
Yeah, space, greenery. We when we moved, we had a dog and a child.
Okay.
And now we have the same dog and two children. I joke with people. There's like our life in downtown Brooklyn, we're pushing strollers around, and we'd have to watch them. A dog wouldn't step on syringes and chicken bones and so it's a very different life. And I start there just because we'll get into Duquesne Light, but I think it's a little bit overused cliche, and people are like, our roots are in the community. It's like Duquesne Light Company, DLC, does not serve anyone who kind of lives outside Allegheny County and Beaver County.
Right.
So we're very literally rooted in the community. And at this point in my life, having two kids here and putting roots down here, I don't want to go anywhere else. So, who we are and how we're rooted in the community just means a lot more to me, having continuing to raise our kids here. So anyway,
awesome. How old are your kids?
My kids are 7. So today, as we're recording, was the first day of first grade.
Oh, boy.
That's a big deal.
Oh, yeah, it is a big deal.
It was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And then my youngest is 3.
3.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're just getting started. This is kind of like school, kindergarten graduate, first day of first grade.
Yeah.
Was he pretty excited?
Yeah. He older one's a boy, younger one's a girl. He was very excited, which is good. We're still in the stage where school is fun and cool. I hope we'll never leave that stage.
Right.
But we're fortunate to be in that stage right now.
That's exciting. That's exciting. And for you did you grow up in Brooklyn or?
No. So born and raised in Seattle, Washington.
Oh, wow. So you're a West Coast guy.
I'm a West Coast guy. Born and raised there. I like to think hopefully take some of the good things from the West Coast, a sense of entrepreneurialism, and try to bring that here and
a good recycler.
I will say we took the family back to see my side of the family first week of August, and from a sustainability standpoint, it is pretty interesting. For recycling is much more widespread there.
Sure.
And then composting is the real deal there in Seattle. Okay. So did a lot of composting. I can talk to you. Well, I probably actually can't talk much more about it. I hope that I know more about strategy and the grid than I do about composting. But I will say I know a lot more about composting now than I did a week ago.
See, you can come back and share that knowledge.
There you go.
So what got you into, before you come to Pittsburgh, what got you into energy? Did you come to energy first or innovation and like a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. My career's kind of been at the nexus there. So I actually started my career as a consultant, and my first customers were actually West Coast utilities. So Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison. Okay. And this was when smart grid, the so-called smart grid, was becoming a thing.
Yep.
I would argue it's still a thing. It's
always
still
evolving.
A big thing. Yeah.
Yep.
And just I kind of caught the bug there. And I also just caught the entrepreneurial Jones. So did a short stint at a startup in Peru, believe it or not.
That's interesting.
And continued to catch the startup bug and did a couple other startups in the energy space. And then went from there to what's called the Moonshot Agency of the Department of Energy.
Sure.
So high risk, high reward, early stage R&D stuff. And I was responsible for commercializing all our electric grid technology there.
Okay.
So you can kind of see what kind of came into the role. Yeah. And
I got to go back to Peru.
It was a fair trade export retailer that we started.
Okay.
So not at all energy related.
Okay.
But you could actually, I wasn't intending to kind of tie this to energy, but you could see the role of, there was a lot of folks with energy poverty there. So, electrification wasn't kind of widespread.
Sure.
You kind of take it back a couple decades, pre 1930s here.
Yep.
Where we were in the Peruvian countryside was, and you can see the impact that the grid has. Not to make it all about the grid, but that's kind of my job.
Yeah.
Just to see the role that it has in economic development in people's lives, where that wasn't widespread, you could literally see the difference.
Yeah.
And just quality of life and things like hygiene and safety, and what that brought to people's lives. So. That was a pretty stark.
It's just not as easy as flicking a switch, right?
Exactly. And people were burning wood, and there were accidents, and so thank you for the grid, but anyway,
but really like a formative experience, I imagine.
Yeah, and it's good to I think before you start trying to start businesses, it might seem easier than it looks. Mm-hmm. If I had any sense that it was really easy to start a business and do something new before that was knocked right out of me.
That was it.
Which was healthy, at that stage.
And so you bring that experience back to you, and you're at the Department of Energy. I mean, there's a little time and space there, right?
Yeah.
So going from, rural Peru then to a behemoth agency, what was that like?
So the really cool thing about where I was at the Department of Energy is a place called ARPA-E, and it's modeled after DARPA, which is the arm of the Department of Defense that actually did invent the internet. Drones, GPS technology all came out of DARPA. And in 2008, they created that agency. Didn't really get staffed for a couple years. And so I was actually commercialization employee number 3.
Wow.
At ARPA-E.
Okay.
So I'm so lucky in so many ways, but one of the great things about that experience is you think, oh yeah, to your point, you're right. Department of Energy is a big behemoth, right? But it was actually a very entrepreneurial experience because we were starting this agency and we were
small,
young,
agile.
Yeah. And no one had a history of, well, what does commercialization look like for the electric grid, for early stage technologies? And so it was wonderful to be able to essentially create it, make it up as you go along, so to speak. And I mean, I'm biased, but I think I think it worked out really well. If you look at the alumni of what we funded, they're kind of well-known names in the space.
Is it the case there? I'm curious. I just want to peel this back a little bit. Like, so when you're in that kind of startup phase of RPE, do you have an agenda, or are you forming the agenda, or like how much of government, how much of industry, like what's that intersections look like?
Yeah. So, and this is where. Or is there
a dartboard where you're just like, hey, let's try this?
This is why, Grant, and not to bring it back to the day job, but this is why having a sense of vision and mission and where you're going is so critical.
Yeah.
So we had a really clear mission at RPE to ensure that the technologies we're funding ultimately had an impact. So that impact, you might, raise venture capital money and become a real company. You might license the technology. But we wanted to ultimately see that these technologies that we funded had an impact on the marketplace, had an impact on people's lives, had an impact on, sustainability and technology, and maintained the American kind of technological edge over our adversaries. And so that was a really clear mission, and it was also a clear, what I would call a swim lane, that we're not going to do things that are very well developed.
Yeah.
We're going to take some big swings, and therefore we're going to...
Which is the purpose.
Yeah, it's the purpose, right? That's why it's not duplicative of private sector funding. The things that we were funding were far too early for any reasonable investor to kind of put capital around. And so when you have that clear mission and you have a clear swim lane, the nice thing about that is my current boss calls it flexibility within a framework, which I think is a good concept.
I like that.
So if you know where you're going,
write that down.
Yeah,
that's good.
You know where you're going, you can get really creative on how you get there.
Yep.
And so that's where it's sort of like create it as you go along, or build it as you go along, or make it up as you go along. That's being a little glib, because we did know where we were going, which is really critical. And then you're kind of creating the path to get there as you go along.
Yeah. I mean, because you need that flexibility, right? Like, because things are going to work, things aren't going to work, and you have to be able to adapt in that process, right? What? Okay, so that takes me up, and then are we coming to Pittsburgh yet?
No. There's just an interlude of my first child and chicken bones, and then from a professional standpoint. We were talking about downtown Brooklyn, but from a professional standpoint, I was at Con Edison in New York.
Okay.
So that is the electric, gas, and they are actually a small steam utility.
That's
right. Based in New York City.
They serve all the steam in Manhattan, right?
Yeah. Yep. So they got a district steam system in Manhattan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then Con Edison, you get into the utility.
Yeah, get into the utility, kind of see.
Get the itch.
And that was a great... because I think one of the great things about going there is a couple things about, and we'll get to kind of utility. Rightfully so, utility customers expect a really high degree of reliability.
Sure.
They expect a high degree of safety. You have to deliver literally every single day, 24/7, 365. And, but you also see just the critical role in the community. So you think of New York, right? Think about all the things that Con Edison and New York powers, right? The UN,
critical
the mayor's
infrastructure.
office, very critical infrastructure.
Am I right in my history that was Thomas Edison?
And that was where the first utility started. Thomas Edison on Pearl Street, not far from where the current headquarters are. That's where really the whole thing. If you're from New Jersey, you'd say Edison, New Jersey.
Sure.
But his first power station was in New York, and on Pearl Street, which is kind of lower Manhattan, not far from Con Edison's headquarters.
And it was the first district grid, correct?
The first district grid.
Yep.
Right. So we want to talk about aged infrastructure. There's
a
lot of aged infrastructure, both here in Pittsburgh, but also in New York.
And I'm drawing a kind of interesting, I'm testing myself here, interesting historic parallel, because you're in Edison world and then you come to Westinghouse World.
That's true, right? AC versus DC. I didn't think to draw that comparison, but there you go. Thank you.
Your book is writing itself here.
There you go.
You could go from DC to AC or so. Yeah, that's kind of the way here. So you get it. I mean, Con Edison is kind of it's obviously a recognizable name. You're talking about the huge challenges in terms of aging infrastructure and the innovation that's required to manage everything that happens across New York City, right?
Yep.
And then Pittsburgh comes?
Then Pittsburgh. So we'll give you the full unvarnished story. I loved my time at Con Edison. I was in the what was called the Utility of the Future group.
Okay.
So you can imagine both strategy and innovation. And I loved it. I think you can go talk to my former colleagues, but I think it's fair to say they liked me too. At least most
They're
of
listening.
them.
They'll be listening.
We had our first child in New York. And so I always say coming here it worked out really well from a career standpoint, but it was first and foremost and fundamentally a life decision.
Sure.
And a really good one at that.
Yeah.
My wife was and is working full time as well. So you have two, working parents, and we don't come from money.
Yep.
Our my wife's family is from Richmond, Virginia, so not that close to either Pittsburgh or New York.
Yeah.
And we had our first, and it's funny. We look back, and when my wife was pregnant, we said, what's our plan here? And said, well, we'll be here for like just a couple more years. We know this isn't our permanent place, but we'll be here for a couple more years, and then we'll kind of figure it out. And after we had our child, our oldest son, said like, no, we got to get out of here now.
Because of the complexities of raising a child in the big city.
And when you really poke into people's stories, you find that either you have like one parent that has family money or works at a hedge fund or something like that, or they have family support there, and we didn't have any of that.
Or they're from there too. I've noted that.
From there, which usually means you have family support, and so it's just incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
So just it's not not an affordable place, and we didn't truly have roots there. So we were very open to looking, and it just so happens that I got wind that Duquesne Light was interested in starting an innovation center.
Cool.
I said, I know something about that because I mentioned I was in the Utility Future Group. We started this new innovation group under the Utility Future Group called the Innovation Hub. So I had experience doing something like that at a utility. And it's not a massive set of people who've had those experiences. And so that felt like a really good fit. And, Grant, bringing this kind of full circle, when I was at DOE, my first time ever was in Pittsburgh was going to check in on some research we had funded at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
Which is now has now become a startup company. Based out of the Energy Innovation Center where my team has an office.
Oh, wow.
So it was like kind of full circle. So
what was the company?
I should remember this on the. So it's basically a magnetics company.
Core Power.
Yes, Core Power. Power. Thank you. I should have known that, but this is like full circle. That was one of the first things I funded at our team funded at the Department of Energy.
Awesome.
And so my first time in Pittsburgh was checking in on that research.
Okay.
Those folks who are now leading the company were graduate students at the time, were PhD graduate students. So Paul at University of Pitt, and those folks, are now like running companies. So it's a really interesting and wonderful evolution, and we're there in the Energy Innovation Center right next, like literally, and normally on Wednesdays where we're recording this, I go into the Energy Innovation Center. So most of those days I'm sitting literally right next to those people.
That's really
which
cool.
is
and Paul Odenicki, right?
Yeah, Paul and Nikki.
So total Pittsburgh moment.
Brandon Granger too, by the way.
Brandon Granger worked with Greg Reed. I worked with Brandon back in the day, but total Pittsburgh moment. I literally had a phone call with Paul yesterday.
Okay, there you go. See, it's a small world we run in. Don't burn bridges.
Yeah, he did not. We did not intentionally to plug Paul, but yeah, we just had a call yesterday about some work that he's doing with sensors and infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a collaboration with them around. Actually, we should put a pin in this about utility sensing
Yes.
and underground infrastructure, bridges, and things like that we work on from a construction side.
Very cool.
So yeah, we should.
And we're doing a pilot with them at Duquesne Light, by the way. So there you go. There you go. It's all full circle.
It all comes full circle. Yeah. So we could start laying some conduit with sensors.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then so your office, now you guys have that lab up in EIC.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Because that's like a core function, right, in terms of advanced grid solutions. And maybe before we go there, tell us about advanced grid solutions.
Yeah. So Advanced Grid Solutions, our team's been around for about 4 years. I had the pleasure of leading it starting in January of 25. And it's essentially, if you think of kind of like the front end of the grid. So we're out. A good analogy that we use is someone who used to run the operations team referred to us as the hunter, and our operations group as the kind of chefs or cookers.
Okay.
So we're out there looking for new grid technologies to give us visibility to the grid, to drive the kind of core things that our customers come to expect: safety, reliability. And affordability. And we're out looking for those things. We're out piloting those things. And then where and when they work, and we can talk about some examples of this. We're, partnering with folks internally to bring them into the enterprise at scale. And so one of the things that we're doing, so we've had an office space in the Energy Innovation Center since it opened, 3+ years ago. Which is great, and you kind of come across cool new energy startups. So, if your listeners haven't been to the Energy Innovation Center, highly recommend it.
It's a pretty awesome space all around.
There's job training there. It's so cool. And one of the new things that we're doing there, that we're building is, we're calling it a grid lab to test inverters, to test relay systems. So that is under construction right now.
Oh, wow. So this is in addition to Pitt's space there.
In addition to Pitt space, but we're partnered with them on this activity. So we'll have grad students in there testing things. And, kind of shameless plug to your listeners, if we want it to be a space that's open to the community. So if big vendors or startup partners have, hardware devices that they want to test in a facility like that, we're open for business. And we'd love to kind of to partner with folks to do that.
You mentioned like Core Power, who's up there, and there's also companies like Exis, I think, which is in the renewable space. And then I know Eaton does a lot with Pitt. So
Eaton's got a space up there. Yeah.
You just get this great corporate, community, university kind of intersection going on up there.
Yeah, we're I think again, go back to being a dad in Pittsburgh in this space. I think one of the things that is so exciting that you can literally see when you come to the Energy Innovation Center is the beginning of this nice energy and sustainability flywheel that we have as a region, really, where we have long-standing expertise in energy. We've got these amazing research institutions in Pitt and CMU. We've got, I'm biased, but a great local utility partner in Duquesne Light. There you go, shameless plug. And those folks working together, and then there's startup companies, like the Core Power and the Sensible Photonics that are spinning out of Pitt and CMU. And then there's grad students being trained there. So you've got the next generation coming on. And so it's just really exciting to actually see this come to fruition, and to start creating something that, in this case, when I'm thinking about sustainable, I mean kind of economically sustainable, and the ecosystem around it in terms of the players that it's sustainable. So you got the next startup and the next thing. It's just really exciting to see.
Just to put an additional plug in this, it is a fascinating space. I mean, You talk about the university connections, like my daughter's on the other end. She's senior, rising. I can't believe I just said that. She's a rising senior, which is
Okay.
like next week.
Yeah.
She did a terrific program up there with Penn State this summer called the Readiness Institute.
Yeah.
And so it was, rising seniors that get a chance to work with, be there on the campus at the Energy Innovation Center, get a chance to interact with companies in terms of like jobs that I would say you don't necessarily think about when you're a junior, senior in high school, right?
Yeah.
And just being a part of that ecosystem is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because you're just bumping into people constantly that are doing really interesting things. The other one that I thought was fascinating recently, the Energy Innovation Training Institute that Rich DeClaudio and his team are working on, which is on the other end of the spectrum, which is helping the workforce development side and the training for everybody in the utility industry and the construction industry, and it's just soup to nuts up there that is all under one roof, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the workforce piece, because you'll see that as well when you're at Energy Innovation Center. Folks being trained for jobs in the industry. And one of the really cool things about it is there's a lot of collaboration with local neighborhood groups.
Yep.
So EIC's up in the Hill District, and there's really deep partnerships with local community groups. So many of the folks from the community right there are the ones being trained for the workforce development program. So it is a true, like, I think of like a cycle or a wheel. It's like we're training the workforce, we're training some of the grad students as well. And then you have folks at the kind of other end of the spectrum. So the Eatons of the world, the Duquesne Lights of the world, who are going to be using this technology and hiring some of these people, right? It's great.
I think about just my experience eons ago, like never had that exposure, right? To know that, these companies are out there. Like you're familiar with Duquesne Light and the brand, and, your parents pay a bill and whatnot, but not necessarily the opportunity, whether it's in innovation or, the career paths that are available in the utility industry.
Yep.
It's really fascinating. I want to go back to this idea of being the hunter and advanced grid solutions. One of the things that we were talking about, before we started to record was, there's these huge challenges that are existing in the utility space. Whether that is increasing demand that you have. The hot topic right now is data centers, and they're hungry for energy. You have that. You have issues like climate and weather. I wanted to ask you about your shirt there too, the derecho.
Yes.
And talk about that experience, but also, we'll come back to this in a second, but I want to get into the customer experience, which drives a lot of your work, right?
Yep.
We're talking about that. But maybe let's talk about some of these challenges first and foremost. Like, how are they driving your hunting expedition, if you will?
Yeah.
And kind of guiding your path.
Yeah. So one of the principles that we want to try to drive is, and it lets us be creative if we're clear on what the problems are, and therefore we leave ourselves open to various solutions. So advanced grid solutions.
There you go.
So what are not just problems, but challenges and opportunities in the industry? There's three that I would really call out. The first is there is a growing supply and demand imbalance that's driven by a number of things. So if you think about the demand side, you got these massive new data centers that are pulling a ton of capacity from the grid. And you have folks, electrifying their cars, which is great. We love that. And that's all putting more demands on the grid. And at the same time, there has been, I would say, some underinvestment in infrastructure in the past, particularly generation infrastructure. So you have a lot of older power plants retiring. So that's putting pressure on the supply side. And, if you take in an economics course, you know what happens when demand goes up and supply goes down and prices go up, right? That's
about all I remember from econ.
And that's you got
that's kind of it.
You got what matters most, I feel like. There you go. You captured it. So at Duquesne Light, we have the wires infrastructure. We do not generate any electricity ourselves, But of course, the bills that our customers pay reflect that supply and demand imbalance. And we are also part of what's called a balancing authority. So it's a regional kind of authority that lets utilities kind of share power needs amongst that. It's called PJM. But there is forecast to be some people say 30 gigawatts, some people say 40 gigawatts shortfall with the supply and demand imbalance by 2030. 40. Yeah. So
over the next 5 years, like 2030 used to be like along, way out in the future, not so much.
Yeah. So and just for your listeners who aren't power geeks, like me and maybe you, Grant.
We were talking about. I listen to the Energy Gang.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm out there.
So rough order of magnitude gigawatt is about 1 million homes. Now, to be clear, this balancing authority is over a very broad
13 states.
Yeah, 13 states, right? So it's not just Pennsylvania, and certainly not just Duquesne Light's territory. But to your point, I mean, that is really significant. And some folks kind of try to be a little bit, I think, maybe scaremonger about that. But what we want to avoid is, and we're already starting to see some of the price challenges that come with that, and some of the affordability challenges that come with the supply and demand imbalance. And definitely what we want to try to avoid is any true capacity issues where we have to do things like rolling blackouts, things like that. And not to, again, scary, we're nowhere near that today, but also that scale of a gap in 5 years means it's something.
Rolling blackout. They're like at the 31st Street pub back in like the early 2000s.
Yeah, and but that's definitely something we want to avoid for our customers. So that's one of the things that's driving it. Again, the supply and demand. The second piece is really just affordability around that. So that's both a kind of an outgrowth of what's happening in the kind of generation part of the value chain, but also, again, the need to update and upgrade our infrastructure and what that does to, kind of customer bills. So that's something we spend a ton of time and attention. You talk about hunting.
Yeah.
We hunt all the time for things that can drive those affordability benefits to our customers. How do we do things better, faster, cheaper?
And so much of that, because like a lot of it is out of your control, right? To go back to that supply and demand imbalance, like you can't control the generation side because that's out of your purview, right? You can affect efficiency in the home and the end user to some degree. But I'm curious on that generation side, like, do you guys just sit back and you're like, oh my God, like what,
So no, great question. The answer is no. It's a hard no.
Yeah.
We want to, while, there are only certain kind of levers available to us directly, I would say, like, because we can't, right now we're not allowed to go build a power plant ourselves, right? And so this is where, I talked at the beginning about, Duquesne Light has deep roots in the community. This is where we have to work with community partners and really, broad, the term is overused, but this is where a true ecosystem is really necessary. We've worked really closely with the Allegheny Conference on Community Development, or ACCD for short, to develop a plan. And, Kevin, our CEO, has talked about it. With some specific recommendations about, essentially boil down to build now and for the future. So we can't only optimize for the next 5 years. So we got to avoid that gap. So that's a really important piece to kind of build now and build quickly. But we can't neglect the future because it's not like 2030 comes around and there's just a gap that year, right?
It's not like Y2K. There's not just a definitive date. It goes on into the future.
Exactly.
For sure.
And so, it's an overused term, but true, all of the above. And when I think of all of the above, it's not just energy sources, but it's really all of the above in terms of who are the group of people that can help us. It's, the folks developing new technologies around generation. It's, peer utilities in the state. It's legislators in Harrisburg. It's gotta be a truly inclusive solution because at that scale of problem, you're not going to solve it without everyone on board.
Can you give some examples of like some of the technologies that are at your disposal in that equation, right? Like if, if you're not on the generation side and expanding supply, what are some things that you and Duquesne Light are doing or can do to improve efficiency or optimize, with some of the tools that you do have?
Yeah, so great question. If you think of an electricity supply chain where, again, there's generation, transmission, distribution, and then there's a customer at the end there. Again, we talked about what we're doing around generation. We don't have kind of direct levers there, but it's working with partners. On the transmission side, to try to enable more capacity, we have been one of the first utilities to roll out what's called dynamic line rating. So you think a transmission line.
Is that dynamic pricing along the transmission lines?
No, it's not dynamic pricing, but the effective capacity of a transmission line will change based on just environmental conditions. What I mean by that, what's the temperature outside? Yep. Yeah, is the wind blowing? That's a really important one. So people talk about the industry term of art is ambient adjusted. That's like the capacity of a transmission line changes based on those environmental conditions, and appropriately, without the kind of dynamic conditions or understanding the dynamic conditions, we appropriately operate those extremely conservatively because bad things can happen if you
push too many electrons through a small wire.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. But what dynamic line rating enables us to do is understanding the real-time conditions of that transmission infrastructure, and in particular can get us to a place where we are putting more throughput through the existing line.
So
because
one wire expands and you can push more electrons through. Is that the
or
simple?
It's windy outside, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that there's wind on a piece of transmission infrastructure means all things created equal, you can basically push more electrons through.
Really?
So
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And what is the discovery? Is that through sensors?
That's through a sensor that's installed, and then software technology around that.
Okay.
There's also some safety and reliability benefits. It can detect line sag and things like that. So it does more than just one thing at once. But that's a great example of what we're doing on the transmission side.
Okay.
Distribution and kind of that retail relationship with the customer. There's a number of things. So, when we rolled out what's called AMI, or automatic metering infrastructure. There's a lot of innovation that we're looking at on the metering side.
And that's across your entire network.
That's across our entire network.
That is the smart utility.
The meter is so important, and the software and services around the meter are so important to driving a smart utility, right? And so we have a project with the Department of Energy to both roll out more dynamic line rating, as well as to drive more intelligence at the meter through some partnerships there. So
that improves consumption and for the end user.
Yeah, and ultimately, as we have greater fidelity. What I mean by fidelity is, quicker reads at 15 seconds and the kind of information capacity to process that. There are price signals that we can send to customers who can better modulate their demand.
Go wash your clothes now, or put
and
the dryer on.
And in fact, that you perfectly teed up the next place I'm going to go, which is, okay, you're a customer. How does that affect you? So I am both an employee and a customer, and I am part of what's called our behavioral load management program. And so really all that means is I get an alert from Duquesne Light that says, hey, between typically, afternoon peak, between 3 and 7 p.m. tomorrow, there's a kind of peak event. You want to modulate your electricity. Well, it's really pretty easy to do, actually, because I have a smart thermostat. I just program it. And guess what? Exactly. And then I'm financially, so it's not just good for the grid, not just good environmentally, because typically you're turning on tends to be a little bit dirtier peaker plants, but you're being financially rewarded for that as a customer. And you project into the future, Grant, you start thinking about where customers' demand is responsive. And in particular, maybe they have batteries, maybe they have solar panels. You might actually, in utility terms, dispatch or aggregate that demand and dispatch it back onto the grid as a support mechanism.
So like a customer-based demand response, like where you typically have large commercial customers able to do that, you're aggregating kind of the smaller residential or or small commercial customers to do the same thing.
Yeah, and we're taking a step in that direction. We're not all the way there.
Okay.
But that first step is that no. But you can see why I'm excited about what we're doing here, because that's how it would work at scale, right? But right now we're just we're doing this behavioral load management that demonstrates, hey, we if we enroll X number of customers with Y amount of load and we send them these signals, this is the response we get.
Yeah.
So it's kind of treated like a generation asset to say, okay, if we do this, we get X, and therefore it's reliable.
And we don't need Y. We don't need that amount of generation.
The grid, as you know, is built to the peak, right?
Yep.
And if we can modulate that peak, we save everyone money. We avoid some GHG emissions. Everyone wins.
Well, that's interesting. Go into that a little bit, because as demand expands, and we designed to N+1 to how many other pluses after our reliability need. Is there more capacity that exists on the sidelines that can be like do we need as much generation as we're talking about, I guess, is the end question.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And there, I will say, there is a diversity of viewpoints around that.
Okay.
I'll put that very
imagine.
nicely. There's a if you're in energy wonk circles, there's a lot of debate around that.
Like, it seems there's a lot of latency in the system by design.
Yep.
But we're not utilizing it to its peak capacity. Is
Yep.
that fair?
And that's where I think there is a lot of potential. And again, we talked about, the industry term is virtual power plant. But again, you can kind of prove that, if you send these signals and you get this response, then to your point, yeah, maybe that 40 gigawatt shortfall is 30 or 20, or it's almost certainly not zero. I'll say that and manage expectations. It's almost certainly not zero. So, and this is where, again, I go back to like true all of the above. It's not just what are the variety of generation technologies that might fill the gap, but it's the whole value chain, right? Mm-hmm. What can we do on transmission? What can we do on distribution? And what can we do with the customer? That individual or family or whoever it is engaging. And this just illustrates that example. And again, everyone wins when you do that. You kind of cap prices. We avoid investing in infrastructure that might not be, 100% necessary. Mm-hmm. So, that we avoid GHG emissions. Again, everyone wins in that circumstance. But when you have a 40 gigawatt shortfall, Grant, like you need it all.
You need it all.
Whole chain.
Like you need all. It's an all of the above strategy.
Yep.
You don't need it all at the same time, though. That's probably the lesson, I guess, I'm getting from this.
Yeah. If you do it right, you might not need it all at the same time. Now, I mean, I'll also say this gets to the kind of third thing that we're dealing with as an industry is just extreme weather, right?
Yes.
And
Tell me about your shirt.
Yeah, so I've got my Gridiron Derecho 25 shirt on here. So
this is I'm curious about this for a couple of reasons. I just need to set this up a little bit.
Yeah.
First time I ever heard of a derecho was in a resilience conference 10 years ago. And it was folks from the city of Baltimore that were talking about it. I had never heard the term derecho.
Yeah.
And they were like, I was like, what is it? And they're like, it's a wall of wind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And so that storm that we had that you're referencing, this is the first I'm seeing the term used.
Yeah.
Is it definitively been called a derecho, or is this more of is this the marketing people getting a hold of you a little bit?
Well, so our for the weather wonks
as
out
a marketing person, I should clarify that.
So for the weather wonks out there, I do not believe it is formally characterized as a derecho. I think it is technically a severe storm. Now, brighter minds than me could so to your point, what is a derecho? There's some definition around straight line winds. I mean, we had 80, 90 mile an hour winds. So I think the kind of effect to our grid and to our customers is the same as a very severe derecho, but I just, in case anyone really wants
to
get
gradients,
the definitions on me, I don't think it is technically a derecho that someone maybe can check afterwards.
I was with a like you in the innovation world, you take meetings with a lot of different people, and sometimes you go into them and you're like, what am I doing here? Right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like 5 minutes in, you're like, oh. And I talked to a guy that's in the meteorological technology space, I'm going to say, has worked for different weather firms from NOAA, all the way up into the private sector, basically doing forecasting. And he was pretty much, this is, you can call it whatever or downplay or whatever, but this is the fundamentals of it were there.
Yeah. And
so your shirt's good, I think.
Oh, thank you.
That's my point.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I mean, again, I think if you're a customer or if you're Duquesne Light, doesn't much matter.
You don't control the weather.
And doesn't much matter where you call it, when you get 80, 90 mile an hour winds. I think the broader point is
disruption.
And I got a first grader, so I think of children's story, and I think it's Alice in Wonderland, the Red Queen. Okay. So where you have to run faster to stay in the same place.
Yep.
And extreme weather is that phenomenon. So just to maintain the same level of reliability, we have to be way better than we were before.
Yeah.
And why? Because you look at any of the statistics, extreme weather events are happening more frequently and they are more severe.
Yep.
And that causes a lot of stress on our infrastructure. And it's our people, and it's a huge challenge. People were working 24/7, 365, trying to get customers back on during that event. And, really proud of all the men and women at Duquesne Light. And just like any event, there's things we've learned and can do better, right? And I think part of that, where is kind of close to me organizationally is, again, you go back to the hunter and what are we looking for? What are the technologies we can find that can make our grid ever more resilient and reliable in the face of extreme weather events? Because we have to, and this is broadly acknowledged at Duquesne Light in the industry, we have to do things differently. It's not like a choice or an opinion. It's just we absolutely have to, even to maintain the same level of reliability, and we want to get ever more reliable. We want to get ever more resilient. So that's why we always have to be out around looking for technologies. That's why we always got to be hunting. So what are we hunting for? Things that can help, address the supply-demand imbalance, things that can drive customer affordability, and things that can make us better prepared for extreme weather events.
Go into that weather one for a little bit. What sort of things are out there right now? Is it better forecasting? Is it better preparation? Like what are some of those?
Faster response. So a really good example is we found and piloted and now are rolling out at scale device from a company called Gridware. It's essentially sensors on the distribution network, typically on poles and wires.
Okay.
And they can detect a lot of things. They can detect, in bland technical terms, kind of thermal runaway events. So you can think of fires, around it. And that's actually how that company got their start out in California with PG&E. And fires, they can detect pole tilt and can detect kind of catastrophic events. So someone, and it definitely happens more than we would like. People drive into our poles, right? Yeah. It can detect that. Now, the huge advantage there is sometimes without that technology, we don't have as clear an idea of exactly where the event occurred. And so rolling out these devices and getting the kind of essentially real-time notifications of these events, we can go straight to where the trouble is, which should enable...
Helps troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it drives both customer safety in terms of we can make folks aware where there's hazards more quickly. And it also drives our employees' safety, that we know exactly where the trouble is, and we might have a sense of exactly what the trouble is. And then, when you think of a storm or extreme weather event, kind of how we started talking about this, it enables a quicker response and hopefully a faster restoration time.
I know it's not applicable everywhere, but what happens, what's opportunity exists for like undergrounding utilities?
Yeah.
Like obviously if you're out in a rural community and lines are traveling like a long distance, probably not an option. But like in urban environments and other places, just for weather, safety, security, what does that look like?
Yep. So something always look at and most of our underground, almost all of our underground network is underground and kind of dense urban territories, and that's kind of common from a kind of topological standpoint, to use a big word. But so that's one of the things we continue to look at is what technologies might we utilize to consider, continuing to underground our infrastructure. The trade-off is, because I go back to the other themes I talked about, affordability is one of them.
Sure. There's a cost underground.
There's a big cost.
Yeah.
It depends on the particular piece of the network and things like that, but the kind of industry rule of thumb is either 8 or 9x what it costs to construct an overhead line, which is the kind of typical line outside of dense urban areas. Now, there are technologies we think that might kind of lessen that gap, and where you can drive that gap down, then you might have you might not it might not be as much of an affordability trade-off to underground. So those are things, again, when you think about hunting and what are we looking for, that's a big thing that we're looking for,
driving the cost of undergrounding down.
And what technologies might enable that.
That's interesting. The other one that I've been curious about too is detection, underground detection. Like, we're doing a lot in the construction space with drones and 3D, 4D mapping and kind of identifying above ground infrastructure. Does that underground space also kind of start to come into play? Like, I remember when we worked on, when I was at the city of Pittsburgh working on the uptown steam distribution lines, we found everything in the kitchen sink underneath there that disrupts like the construction cycle. Are there's opportunities there that you guys start to see?
There is, yeah. So one of the, you started talking about underground infrastructure in the context of, typically that infrastructure is more reliable because it's less exposed to extreme weather events, right? The
squirrels.
The trade-off is, though, without that infrastructure being smart, sometimes when you have an issue in the network, it's really difficult to find, right?
Yep.
And so that's one of the things we want to try to drive to from managing our underground network, is greater visibility to the health and status of our underground electric cable, as well as continuing kind of greater visibility to what's happening in the manhole. And what that can do is, again, gets you right to where the trouble is, can detect issues more quickly and exactly where they are, can determine, to your point, is it DLC infrastructure that's the issue? Is it someone else's infrastructure? Because there's a lot of that downtown. So that's also a big area for us. We have looked at, and we'll likely continue with what's called partial discharge technology. It's just a technology to send little discharges through our underground cable to detect cable health, and that can enable us to be more proactive with our maintenance, which again goes back to better able to respond to issues when you have it, reduces time to restoration where there's an issue, and drives safety. So that's the kind of thing. I'm really glad that hasn't always been the coolest and sexiest thing to think about underground infrastructure, but I'm seeing a lot of really sharp folks that are developing really interesting new technologies in that space. So I'm optimistic about over the next, let's call it, decade, but hopefully even shorter than that. That 8 or 9x cost gap between overhead and underground becomes something less than that. What the less is, I don't know, but I hope it's less than that.
That's amazing. Just to come home here for a second, I wanted to maybe finish up with the customer experience. As Duquesne Light customers, what are some of the things that you see for customers that are right at the precipice, or we're going to start to see, being introduced or part of the customer experience in the not too distant future?
Yeah. So I know we're at the end, but I'm going to be brief with my history lesson. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. Before I go there, actually, though, I mean, I'm also curious. You mentioned like vehicle electrification and your smart meters and things like that. What is the customer experience has evolved. Do you see a lot more customer engagement?
Yes.
And then how does that drive my question, which is like what's coming up?
Yeah. So, really big picture, kind of grid 1.0, when we were building the thing out and electrifying everyone, electrons only traveled in one direction. It was power plant through transmission distribution down to the customer. That's still mostly how it's done. But then you started having kind of customer sided technology. So, solar and storage on a customer side, and you had two-way power flows. You can think of that kind of grid 2.0. And, really what I think long-term, the precipice is grid 3.0. So those distinctions between generation, transmission, distribution, the customer, I think are blurring. And that can be really healthy because, again, we think of the supply-demand imbalance. Customers are not just subject to that. Customers can participate in addressing that. Depending on
They
the
can be
technologies.
active.
They can be active, right? Whether that's demand response. I talked about our behavioral load management program. Again, that's something that a single customer can do that benefits everyone. That benefits the broader customer base. And so I see a lot more of that, and there's a lot of kind of enabling technologies when you think of the communications around that. We talked about metering earlier, and then kind of customer-sided technologies. There's a lot more to come there, and then there's a lot more to come in terms of the market mechanisms around that. So I think that'll be a big driver. And then the other really big overarching theme is I mentioned about the Red Queen effect. We got to run faster, stay in the same place. Think about the same thing with customer expectations. I think a lot of customers appropriately so are conditioned to the kind of Amazon one click.
Yeah.
Electrons,
I
don't
want my
always
electrons and I want them now.
Yeah. And but instead of complaining about that, I think that's an opportunity. What do we do from the customer experience? What do we do from market mechanisms? What do we do from technologies to get a little bit closer to that? And particularly when you think about our, and we can see this demographically, typically, that's an expectation from our younger, more digitally fluent customer base. And those folks are the customers of the future. So we need to meet them, where they are and where they're going, right? And so what are the kind of digital tools to enable that? We think about things like chat and things like that. There's also just kind of the experience side. So I think there's a long way to go there. We're making progress, but got a long way to go to have the one-click electrons. So
that's awesome. Let's leave it right there. Josh Gould, thank you so much.
Nice.
Great conversation with you. Thanks for all that you do at Duquesne Light. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Grant. I really enjoyed being on.
Awesome. Thank you for listening in to The Green Voice. I'm Grant Ervin with S&B USA. We will have you come back for the next episode. We'll talk to you soon. Be well.